Welcome back to The Big Picture. I'm John DeSciullo in for Judge Penny Wolfgang, who is on assignment. Our guest, very important guest, is Rebecca Stevens, and Rebecca Stevens is a part of Best Self Behavioral Health, director of the Child Advocacy Center there. And we're talking about April being Child Abuse Awareness Month, and as we repeat this program down the line, of course, child abuse is something to be aware of and be very concerned about any time of the year. I have a few phone numbers that we're going to offer, and then we'll offer them later on as well. And our good friend Chatham's going to put these up on the screen for us. But crisis services is one number. If there's something that's happening, then you feel you need immediate attention, the phone number to call, and they're there 24 hours a day, is 834-3131. So write that down. And Best Self Behavioral Health, and the organization that we're talking with Rebecca about today, their number is 884-0888. And we talked a little bit in the previous segment about CPS, Child Protective Services. They have an 800 number. It's 1-800-342-3720. And again, we're going to have those for you a little later in the show. Rebecca, when somebody sees or suspects child abuse, we talked a little earlier about some of the lag in reporting, but if someone feels that they need to make a call, it could be anybody. It could be a neighbor. It could be, like you mentioned, a teacher. But the key is to make the call if you think something is happening. Am I right?
Absolutely. As professionals, medical providers, law enforcement, social workers are required by law, as are teachers, to call if they suspect something. But any good community member, a parent, a Boy Scout troop leader, if you see something, it really is important to say something and to do something about it. As an adult, I would just hate to know that I suspected something was happening, I didn't do anything about it, and I found out later it was happening, and that child continued to get abused because of my inaction.
And it's anonymous. I should mention that as well. I'm to understand that when somebody makes that call, unless they don't want to be anonymous, I would think that all of that is important, because if somebody feels there might be some retribution, you mentioned earlier, sometimes when abuse cases are reported, there's fear of retribution. So this is an anonymous call if you need to make it.
Absolutely. As mandated reporters, we have to say who we are and why we're making that call. But any community member that's just making a call can make it anonymously without fear of anybody knowing who's made that call.
We talked a little bit about the pandemic and some of the things that have happened as a result. I know with Best Self Behavioral Health, mental health is also a focus of your organization. And as somebody in your position, are you seeing more instances where people are struggling with mental health as a result of being cooped up in the pandemic or dealing with illness that might have beset their family, in addition to the abuse overall, but how mental health impacts that?
Certainly, the isolation, the potential financial struggles, housing struggles, having your children home with you 24/7 and 24/7. There's a lot of different stressors that the pandemic has exacerbated, and certainly we at Best Self are aiming to be available to people in whatever capacity that we can.
You know, you mentioned something very important when everybody's together in our society before COVID. Well, and it's been around for a while, where people are very mobile. They're taking their kids to soccer practice. There's a play practice. There's an event going on, and that all came to a screeching halt. And taking abuse out on a child it's a crime. First of all, it is a crime in addition to being a horrible thing. We just completed the Variety Kids Telethon, and one of the stories here, Rebecca, was of shaken baby syndrome, where a parent took out their frustrations on a baby, and it ended up that child survived but grew up with cerebral palsy and some other situations. So I think that would be another important thing to bring up, that if you have as a group and you're in your home as a result of the pandemic, you can't take out your aggressions on your children.
That's absolutely true. And that's the difference between abuse and discipline. People sort of sometimes get confused between wanting to teach your child a lesson that something is wrong and dangerous and you don't want them to do that again, versus you being angry and not being able to manage your rage and taking that rage out on someone who can't defend themselves. And that's the difference between abuse and discipline.
How do you make that determination as a counselor if somebody might think that the discipline is abuse and the parent thinks that it's just discipline?
There really isn't any form of discipline that should injure a child. And by injure, I mean leave a mark, break a bone, cause a child to need emergency services, have burns. None of those things all exacerbate what we would commonly call discipline. Those are now extreme cases and really would be called abuse.
Yeah. I saw here in the notes that the Child Advocacy Center is actually looking to expand a little bit here in Western New York. Tell us why.
So pre-pandemic, we were seeing around 1,100 children a year. This past year during the pandemic, we saw around 700. As I mentioned, there is a considerable drop in reporting. But we know that 1,100 that we were seeing is only about a third of the children in Erie County that really need the help. At the CAC currently in our very pretty location on the west side of Buffalo, we have a beautiful home. It's a old home built in 1898, and we've been there since 1996. We only have one medical office, we only have one therapy office, and we will only have one forensic interview office. So really we're limited on how many children we're able to see each day. So what we're looking to really do is quadruple our space so that we can see all of the children who need help anytime that they need help. So we're looking to really come into the 21st century into a bigger space and meet the needs of every child and their family as best as we can.
And like we mentioned earlier, a comforting place as well. I should mention that the Child Advocacy Center at Best Self, you define yourself as innovative in addition to being comprehensive, and it's safety, support, very important. People feel the sense of security, and it's a healthy place for children and families who are affected by trauma and abuse in Erie County. And I should ask you too, Rebecca, if substance abuse plays a role in any of these cases, and how do you determine if that is one of the reasons?
Our advocates, our partners in child protection and our partners in law enforcement, with the investigation and really talking to the families about what's going on in the household and what we might be able to assist with. And sometimes it could be that a parent may have an addiction issue that they're struggling with and may not therefore be always present to notice what's happening to the child by somebody in their life. As you mentioned earlier, 90% of children are abused in their homes by somebody that they know, love, and trust. Often than not, that person is a parent or a parent's stepfather or a parent's significant other. So often, if mom hypothetically is the safe parent and she's struggling with an addiction or a mental health issue, she just might be able to be doing her best as a parent to be protecting that child. So we want to get help for the child and help for the parent if she's looking to make that happen.
How do you help children, in addition to talking to them and figuring out what happened and how to heal them? How does that process work?
So when a child comes to the center, they're explained that they will meet with a forensic interviewer who will let them tell their story in one room. It's a cozy room, it just has 2 couches, and they sit on the couches and the interviewer asks them questions and lets them know that we're here just for them. The team all watches that interview via TV in a different room, so they're not in there hovering over the child and making them feel intimidated. Afterwards, the child has an opportunity to meet with our medical provider. And as you know, as a sexual abuse case obviously involves some sort of physical harm to the child's allowed to ask the medical provider questions that they might be concerned about. Like, unfortunately, we hear questions like, does this mean my body is broken? And they're able to get reassurance that they're okay. And just because this has happened to them, they can heal and they can have a happy and healthy future, as well as getting them connected with a therapist who can make sure that they know that this wasn't their fault and nothing that has happened, we hope, will ever happen again, and help build their confidence and their resources and their reduce the impact that the trauma has had on them.
You help the children. Is there help for the abuser if they want to stop doing what they're doing? Is that something you interact with at all? If a parent comes to you and says, I've done this horrible piece, is that something you do, or is that left for law enforcement?
So really, at the Child Advocacy Center, the national standards require us to not work with those families or those parents, the offenders, adult offenders. They want our centers to be safe places for children, and they believe that having an offender on site makes it therefore unsafe. So yes, we certainly leave that to law enforcement. If an offender wanted to get counseling and wanted to work on what their challenges were themselves, we could make that available to them at other locations. But honestly, there's no research that I know that says that unless an offender is willing to stop, that there is successful help that's available. There just is no known treatment to make this go away once it's been part of that adult offender's life.
Rebecca, what motivated you to get into this field?
Oh boy. Well, I knew I wanted to be a social worker, and I knew I wanted to work in a field that made a difference. I started off my career for, well, around 16 years working at Crisis Services, who you mentioned earlier, with adult victims of rape and domestic violence and elder abuse, and really felt that I was making a difference. But this opportunity came up to work with child abuse, and I jumped at it, and I'm very lucky that Best Self made me part of the team. I really feel that it's important to have my work mean something and feel like I go to work every day knowing that my work is important.
Well, it is important, and you help people in so many ways, and most importantly, children. What's the website?
The Child Advocacy Center's website is cacbuffalo.org, and the Best Self Behavioral Health's website, our larger parent organization that's a behavioral health agency that treats substance abuse and mental health disorders for people of all ages through all of Western New York and not just through Erie County, is bestselfwny.org.
And the Child Advocacy Center, what is that site again, Rebecca?
cacbuffalo.org.
cacbuffalo.org. And I'm going to read these numbers again, if you don't mind, for people, so that they can make sure that if they need help or they want to help a child, they can do that. The Crisis Services is 834-3131. Best Self, we just talked about, is 884-0888. And Child Protective Services is an 800 number, 1-800-342-3720. We have just about a minute left, Rebecca. Is there anything you'd like to say just to kind of pull together your concerns about child abuse and your center?
I think it's just it's important for all of us to be aware that child abuse is preventable. It also doesn't discriminate. I think people tend to think that child abuse happens in those homes or in that location, but we see kids from all over Erie County, from all different socioeconomic backgrounds, cultures, races, religions. It's something that impacts us all as a community, and therefore we all as a community have a responsibility to do what we can to make it stop.
Well, I hope this program has helped families who might be in a situation where they feel they need to call, and you are and your team are the ones to call. Rebecca, thanks for joining us via Zoom on The Big Picture today.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We'll see you soon, and good luck to you and your team. I'm John DeSciullo. Thanks for watching WBBZ-TV, The Big Picture. Judge Penny Wolfgang will return for subsequent programs, and we'll see you soon right here on your hometown MeTV station.